Jesus Christ did not die on the cross.
Whoever dies on the cross dies an accursed death.
Jesus essentially was only on the cross for 3 hours.
He was pierced into his side,
Yeah.
and blood and water gushed out.
Then we've also got his legs not being broken. Actually, there was a plan for Jesus's wounds to be healed.
Pilate himself, he didn't think that Jesus was guilty.
Jesus on the cross went into a swoon, unconsciousness, maybe some kind of coma in which it appeared he was dead, but all these little things are pointing towards that he's alive. Pilate enabled Jesus to be saved from the cross.
When he's even put on the cross, he says, my Lord, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah.
If his mission was to die for the sins of humanity, why would he be so against it and so averse to it?
It's a forced sacrifice then. It's Jesus doesn't want it to happen and God does want it to happen. All the signs are towards someone who's trying to escape. He did not want to die on the cross.
What benefit has that brought to humanity?
So we're going to prove through the Bible that Jesus Christ did not die on the cross.
Yeah. So Christians believe that Jesus died on the cross and then he was resurrected and then he went up to heaven and all of that. But the Bible clearly says in the Old Testament that whoever dies on the cross dies an accursed death.
Right.
Surely he couldn't have died an accursed death, right? Now, there's one thing that we want viewers to remember whilst watching this, is that what was the mission of Jesus? Himself, he said this, it's clearly written in the Bible, in the New Testament. He said that I have been sent not for anyone but the lost tribes of Israel, the lost sheep of Israel.
Yeah.
There were 12 tribes of Israel. And at that time in Jerusalem, in Palestine, only a few of them were present there.
Yeah.
The rest of them, due to the exiles, etc., they had sort of spread eastward.
Exactly.
So he came to seek and to find the lost tribes of Israel.
Yeah. Another point to keep in mind as we're going through this podcast is that Jesus was asked for a sign, and he said, I'm not going to give you any other sign other than the sign of Jonah. And he says, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So these 2 points to keep in mind, that number one, Jesus was sent for the lost tribes of Israel. He needed to fulfill that mission.
As any prophet does.
As any
you have to
prophet.
fulfill your mission.
Second sign was, the second point is that he said, I'm going to give the sign of Jonah, which is crucial. Okay, now let's go forward. We're going to go to the crucifixion events. Okay, these were the crucifixion events. The first point is that Jesus was put on the cross on a Friday. And according to the Bible, he was put on just around 12 p.m. and taken off at 3 p.m., right? Some other people, because there's some contradictions in the Bible in the sense of when he was put on. So some say it was 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. But anyways, it's accepted that he was also put on from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m., 3 hours. Sabbath starts on the evening of Friday. The Jews didn't put people on the cross during the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jesus essentially was only on the cross for 3 hours, maximum of 6 hours.
Yeah.
We know that the crucifixion, or the way of punishing someone through crucifixion, was a long ordeal over a few days, 3 days, right? It was not a matter of a few hours in which someone dies on the cross. The second point in this is that in Matthew as well, it's very clear that there was sudden darkness when Jesus was put on the cross. And there, obviously, when there's darkness, you don't really know when the sun set, what's happening with the sun. So they took him off early because they didn't want him on the day of Sabbath to be hanging on the cross. Yeah. That's the first point.
Yeah, and the person in charge of this whole ordeal was Pontius Pilate, which we'll come on to later on.
Yeah.
But there was more than just this, that it was darkness. There was a lot of things that were taking place. For example, his wife's dream. Of course, we'll come on to this. But a lot of things alluded to the fact that something was about to happen. Something wasn't quite right. So we've got Friday. He was taken off much earlier than you're meant to be taken down to kill someone. Then we also have the fact that he was jabbed by a soldier. He was pierced into his side and blood and water gushed out. Now, of course, a person has to be living for blood and water to gush out.
Yeah.
A dead body, that just doesn't happen.
It's a beating heart, right?
Exactly.
So if it's gushing out, and actually it's in the readings, when you go deeper, it shows it's linear, right?
Yeah.
So if the blood is coming out in a linear way to the body,
then there's something pumping. The blood is pumping through the body. That means at that time, blood was pumping through, meaning that he was alive.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that his legs weren't broken. So usually what would happen is that the legs, they support you when you're on the cross. In order for you to breathe, the legs support your lungs in order to breathe. But what they would do is that they would break the legs to make sure that doesn't happen and the person dies. But Jesus, coincidentally or not so coincidentally, his legs weren't broken. There's no mention of this in the Bible.
And the legs of the other two people on the cross who were alongside Jesus, their legs were broken, right? But Jesus' legs were not broken, okay? So we've got Friday being put on Friday for a matter of hours being taken off the cross. We've got then the Roman soldier piercing his side, blood and water gushing out, as the Bible says. Then we've also got his legs not being broken. Finally, when he gets taken down, Joseph of Arimathea, he asks Pilate to give the body to him. The Joseph of Arimathea is his disciple. Pilate, and it's mentioned in the Bible, is surprised by the fact that Jesus has died so quickly. Right? And he's shocked. And the reason why he's shocked is because it takes days and days and days for someone to die in the way of crucifixion. It's not a matter of hours or even one day. But anyway, he gives the body to his disciples. Let's talk about Pilate. Let's talk about his wife.
So Pilate is crucial throughout this whole thing. The first thing to remember is that Pilate himself, he didn't think that Jesus was guilty. How do we know this? There's about 3-4 reasons why. First of all, when Jesus was, of course we know that he was betrayed by Judas and he was brought in and they took him away and everything like that. So at that time, Pontius, in the Bible it says this, that he didn't think that Jesus was guilty. So instead what he did is that he opened it up to the crowd. And he said, what I will do is that there's another person called Barabbas. I will free one of these two men. And the people chose Barabbas to be freed. So therefore Jesus, of course, he was obliged now to put him on the cross. Before putting him on the cross, he received a message from his wife. And his wife said, have nothing to do with this man. Because of him, I have suffered many things in my dream. So of course, she had a nightmare about this. And we find in the Bible, we find many verses where dreams, of course, they are very truthful when they're from God. So she sent a message to him saying, don't have anything to do with this man. So now it's slowly starting to make sense. All these things that seem to be a coincidence, it wasn't actually the case.
Not just that, Pilate also washed his hands, saying that I've got nothing to do with this punishment.
He said that in front of the people.
He said, it's recorded in the Bible. We'll put the lower thirds, the biblical verses. And he says, I've got nothing to do with this. His wife doesn't want anything to do with it either. So what we're saying is that actually Pilate enabled Jesus to be saved from the cross. And that's why Jesus was put on the cross for just a few hours. His legs weren't broken. And Pilate readily gave Jesus' body to his disciples. Okay, now the body comes down. Joseph of Arimathea takes him to the tomb. And then we have some recordings in the Bible that the disciples are bringing in spices and herbs and curing medicine, so aloe and myrrh and all these things. And it's actually like in the Bible it says 75 pounds worth, which is about 34 kilos of all these herbs and ointment. So what we're saying is that actually there was a plan for Jesus's wounds to be healed. They took this ointment to apply to Jesus' body to heal him, because you wouldn't be taking 34 kilos worth of herbs and these kind of things into the tomb unless, especially during those times, it was, herbal medicine which would heal. And even today, in fact, in the East, they use herbal medicine. So that was another indication that they were gonna save Jesus. What we're saying is that Jesus on the cross went into a swoon, unconsciousness, maybe some kind of coma, in which it appeared he was dead, but all these little things are pointing towards that he's alive.
Same as Jonah, to be honest. I mean, when Jonah was in the whale, if you were to be swallowed by a whale, every person would think that he's passed away. There's no way he can be alive. Same way, being put on the cross, everyone naturally would think that this person, there's no way he can come back out alive. And we talked about Pilate, so all of these things were taking place, but even Jesus himself, before he was put on the cross.
Just before that, I think let's talk about this Jonah prophecy now, right? The Jonah sign. Because Jesus said that I'm not going to show any other sign apart from the sign of Jonah.
Yeah. So what's so important about the sign of Jonah specifically that he said that?
Exactly. It's him going into the tomb.
Yeah.
3 days, 3 nights, and then according to the Christian narrative, he's resurrected.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is he was alive for 3 days, 3 nights.
Exactly.
And that was the healing process, just like Jonah in the belly of the whale was alive for 3 days and 3 nights, even though it seemed like he would die.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of a sign. So someone asks a prophet of God for a sign that, is to show the might and the power of God Almighty. So the sign of Jonah, he was swallowed by a whale and he was alive throughout all of that. He was actually praying to God. It mentions that in the Bible. And then he came out of the belly of the whale. He was vomited out. Yeah. And he went back to his people and he was accepted by them. Yeah. And he didn't face humiliation or anything like that. Rather, he was accepted. So same thing with Jesus. He was a prophet of God. When he came back from the cross, he was alive at that time. Mm-hmm. And then he continued that mission that we mentioned earlier on. And he was accepted by the people. Yeah.
And the 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, Jesus had to be alive.
Yeah.
If he was giving the comparison to the sign of Jonah.
Yeah, it was
a
parable, right?
Exactly.
He was drawing a comparison.
Yeah. Okay, now going forward. So he's taken down, he goes into the tomb. What we're saying is that the introduction of all these herbs and things are for his healing.
Yeah.
After 3 days, he's healed. The rock is somehow removed. We're saying that's a whole escape plan in which Pontius Pilate and all these people are involved. And then Jesus is going around. Now, before we talk about what happens after this, let's talk about actually Jesus himself before the night of the crucifixion and on the cross. What was he saying? What was he doing? It clearly points towards the fact that he did not want to die on the cross.
Yeah.
And even if Christians say that he died for whole of humanity, we're going to show actually he didn't want to die.
He didn't want to die, yeah, of course. So the night before he was put on the cross, he spent that night in the Garden of Gethsemane. Yeah. It's mentioned so clearly in the Bible. And he spent that whole night praying to God. Mm-hmm. And he was saying to God, take this cup of suffering away from me. Yeah. Now, naturally, we know if his mission was to die for the sins of humanity, why would he be so against it and so averse to it?
Exactly.
Right? Because we know, for example, the prophet Ismail, the sacrifice, they were very happy in that.
Exactly.
He said it to his father. He said that, if this is the will of God, then happily go for it. Sacrifice me. Whereas Jesus, why is he going against it?
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop here. Then when he's even put on the cross, he says, my Lord, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah.
Now, why would a prophet say that to God? Why have you forsaken me? This goes back to that point we made at the start, that whoever dies on the cross dies an accursed death.
Yeah.
And we know that God can't forsake a righteous man, let alone a prophet.
Exactly. And the whole fact is also that, look, if he knew he was going to die for the sins of humanity, right, and atonement and all these things, then he'd just be happy about it, right? But he's praying the night before. He's telling his disciples to get up and pray as well. And in the where it says, take away this cup of suffering away from me, at the end it says, but not how I want it, it's how you want it, God. Do it like that. Yeah. Okay. Now, a lot of Christians to this will say that, look, that's a clear proof that God wanted him to die, but it's a forced sacrifice then. It's Jesus doesn't want it to happen and God does want it to happen. Yeah. And the fact is that even on the cross later on then, in Jesus' mind, he knows he's going to be saved. That's why he says, why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me? Yeah. Right? Otherwise, he would have known that, I'm going to die and this is going to be for humanity. Yeah. But he's not wanting this to happen. Yeah,
the whole concept of a forced sacrifice. Yeah. I mean, let's just leave the fact that he was a prophet aside for a second. Yeah. You or me, if we are forced to make a sacrifice, there's no blessing in that.
Yeah, exactly.
So how can a prophet who was supposedly meant to die for the whole of humanity, he doesn't want to do it, but he's being forced to do it by God, supposedly. That's what the narrative says.
Yeah.
There's no blessing in that and there's no benefit in that whatsoever. And you see it nowadays. I mean, let's say if he did atone the sins of humanity, what benefit has that brought to humanity? I mean, Christians nowadays, they're still committing sin, adultery, drinking, all of these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that whole doctrine doesn't really make sense.
Exactly. Now, after 3 days in the tomb, he escapes and he appears to his companions, his disciples. They're shocked. They think he's a ghost, of course, because for them as well, they think he died on the cross, right? But he says, look, feel my wounds. touch me, I'm that flesh and bone.
Yeah.
Give me something. Is there something to eat? Are you guys? And they're like, yeah, we're eating fish. He eats fish. All the signs are there of a man who's recovered from his wounds and injuries, and now he's eating. Yeah. He's human, right?
Yeah. If it was a spirit, why would he be showing his wounds his flesh and eating like a human body?
Exactly. And then there's this weird... So if you're reading the Bible, he's seen in disguise. He's seen... All the signs are towards someone who's trying to escape. He's seen as a gardener, dressed up as a gardener, in disguise as a gardener. He's seen on the road to Galilee. He's telling his disciples, meet me in Galilee. He's not going out during the day. He's meeting in secret. If he was resurrected, there is no fear anymore.
He's transcended all of that.
Right. He's going to go up into the heavens. The Jews can't do anything. They can't catch him, right? Exactly. And the road to Galilee, why is he going to Galilee? Is like there's no port there to, or some station there to take him into the heavens, right? It's all an indication that now he's leaving the area in which he was persecuted. And this is where we go to the lost tribes of Israel.
Yeah, exactly. Why was he leaving that area?
To go to the lost tribes of Israel, exactly. Yeah. And this is where he was going to fulfill his mission, that the tribes of the Jews in Jerusalem rejected him, but there were loads of tribes still left. In fact, historical records show us that they went all the way to Afghanistan, modern-day Afghanistan, and he needed to preach to them to fulfill his mission to the lost tribes of Israel. Otherwise, if he didn't, then he would be a prophet who didn't fulfill his mission.
Yeah, and it's funny because people actually laugh at this when some people do anyway.
Yeah.
When you tell them that, Jesus traveled, which we can get onto in another episode as well, that, he traveled through Afghanistan and he went all the way to Kashmir and India. They laugh at this. How is Jesus traveling there?
Yeah.
But if you just ask them that, okay, fine, if he died there and he was resurrected and he was sent up to heaven, has he completed his mission? Yes or no?
Exactly.
He hasn't, because historically it's proven that all of the tribes weren't there. So he had to go and seek them, as he said himself.
Yes.
And that's why he traveled there.
Exactly. And, is heaven further away to fly up to, or is traveling towards India, which were established trade routes, right? Which is more further away. So it's not out of rationality either. There were established trade routes all the way linking the East and the West, or at least East and West in that time.
Yeah, and this is even from non-Muslim sources. Of course, we're Ahmadi Muslims, but even aside from this,
Christian sources.
Impartial sources. They've done research on this. There's so many documentaries, books that have been published about this.
Exactly, and we will get onto that, how and why Jesus went to India and Afghanistan, that area, to preach to the lost tribes of Israel. Yeah. Okay, great. So let's summarize the whole episode again. Yeah. How did Jesus not die on the cross as per the Bible?
Okay, so Jesus did not die on the cross because, starting off with the events on the cross, so he was only put for a few hours, his blood and water gushed out, his legs weren't broken. Then we have Pontius Pilate, his wife's dream. He himself knew that he wasn't guilty. He did all of these things to make sure that he didn't die on the cross. Yeah. He washed his hands, like you said. Jesus himself, he prayed the night before in the Garden of Gethsemane. No. He, when he was put on the cross, he said, "Lord, why have you forsaken me?" Yeah. And whoever dies on the cross dies an accursed death, as per the Bible.
Exactly. And then in the tomb, he was there for 3 days, 3 nights. His disciples were coming in with medicine. He comes out, meets his disciples again. He's eating, he's walking, he's under disguise, and then he disappears. And just to kind of finalize, the whole element of he goes to Galilee and then he's on a mountain and then he meets the disciples and then he disappears and a cloud comes. This is just explaining for him traveling along a mountain. And anyone who's been hiking, they see when they go on a mountain, suddenly clouds can appear and you can't see it even like 2 meters ahead of you. So that's all this verse is talking about in the Bible, that he was on the mountain, he spoke to them, and he obviously would have told them that I'm going now to the lost tribes of Israel, and that was that, and he walked away. It's not as if he went up into the sky, right? Yeah. So this is how, from the Bible, Jesus did not die on the cross, and we tried keeping this short, snappy, to the point. There's lots of Ahmadiyya literature out there, which we'll put in the description as well, and everyone could read up further and go in depth into this topic.